They were slimmer, stronger, and never on a diet. Here's what they actually did. Close your eyes and picture your mother or your grandmother in her kitchen. It's 1962. She's setting the table for dinner. She isn't counting calories. She isn't following a program or tracking macros or feeling guilty about what she ate for lunch. And yet, looking back at the photographs from that era, something is undeniable. She was slim. So was almost everyone around her. What did she know that we've forgotten? Today we're going back to find out. I've been digging into the everyday eating habits of ordinary American women in the 1960s. Not diet advice, not nutrition science, just how they actually lived. And what I found stopped me cold. These women weren't disciplined in the way we think of discipline today. They weren't white-knuckling it through cravings or skipping meals or swapping ingredients. They were simply living inside a set of habits so sensible that staying slim was almost automatic. 10 habits today, all of them forgotten. And I want you to stay all the way to number 1, because it isn't about food at all. It's about something that shaped everything else on this list, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. 10. They never snacked between meals. Let's start with the habit that underpins everything else. In 1960s households, eating between meals simply wasn't done. The kitchen closed after breakfast and didn't reopen until lunch. It closed again and didn't reopen until dinner. Children who wandered in looking for something to eat were sent back out. Not because food was scarce, because that was simply the rule. Here's what that rule quietly accomplished. Without constant eating, insulin levels stayed stable throughout the day. The body had time to finish digesting one meal before the next arrived. And in between, it did something we rarely allow it to do anymore. It burned stored fat for energy. Nobody called it intermittent fasting in 1962. They called it waiting for dinner. The snack food industry was still in its infancy. Doritos didn't exist until 1966. Pringles came in 1968. And even when they arrived, they were occasional treats, not daily staples, not something kept in a drawer at work or a bag in the car. Without the constant presence of food, people came to the table genuinely hungry. And when you're genuinely hungry, a real meal satisfies you completely. That satisfaction is what we've lost. And it connects directly to the next habit. 9. Portions were shockingly small, and nobody felt deprived. If you could sit down at a 1960s dinner table, the first thing you'd notice is how modest the plates look. A dinner plate was 9 inches across. Today's standard is 12. A hamburger was 3 to 4 ounces. Today's average is double that. A large soda was 8 ounces. Today's small is 16. The portions weren't small because people were going without. They were small because that was simply enough, and bodies that weren't being constantly overfed had no trouble recognizing when enough was enough. The psychology here matters. Research now confirms that we eat more when we're served more, regardless of hunger. It's called the portion size effect. The women of that era were naturally protected from it simply by the size of the plate in front of them. They cleaned their plates, as was expected, and felt satisfied, not stuffed. Satisfied. That distinction between satisfied and stuffed is one the modern food environment has almost entirely erased. 8. Everything was cooked from scratch. The 1960s kitchen had no frozen dinners, no jarred sauces, no boxes of instant anything. A typical pantry held flour, butter, eggs, potatoes, onions, and whatever was fresh from the market that week. Dinner meant actual cooking, and that one fact changed everything. When you cook from scratch, you control every ingredient. There's no hidden sugar in the spaghetti sauce because you made it from tomatoes and garlic. There's no engineered combination of salt, fat, and sweetness calibrated to make you want more. The food tastes like food, and when food tastes like food, your body knows when it's had enough. Scratch cooking also created a natural limit on indulgence. Making a cake required time, effort, and intention. You didn't bake 3 a week. You made one for Sunday and everyone got a modest slice and felt lucky for it. The effort involved in producing something special made it genuinely special, and genuinely satisfying in a way that grabbing something from a package never is. 7. Sugar was saved for something worth saving it for. In 1960, the average American consumed about 12 teaspoons of added sugar per day. Today, that number is 22. And that's before accounting for all the sugar hiding in places we don't think to look. Pasta sauce, bread, yogurt, salad dressing. Foods that have no business being sweet. In the 1960s, sugar lived in obvious places: the sugar bowl, the candy jar, the occasional homemade dessert, and because it was reserved for special moments, it retained its power. A slice of homemade apple pie on a Sunday was genuinely exciting. A birthday cake meant something. When sweetness is everywhere, it means nothing, and you keep reaching for more, trying to feel the satisfaction that used to come so easily. The hidden sugar in today's processed food isn't just a calorie problem, it's a hunger problem. It drives cravings, disrupts the hormones that signal fullness, and keeps the body in a constant cycle of wanting more. The women of that era stepped off that cycle entirely, not through willpower, but simply because the cycle didn't exist yet. 6. Meals happened on a schedule, and the kitchen closed in between. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. These weren't rough guidelines, they were as fixed as the school bell. And that predictability did something remarkable to the body. When eating happens at consistent times, the body learns to prepare for it. Digestive hormones activate ahead of mealtimes. Hunger arrives naturally and on cue. And just as importantly, it quiets down between meals because the body trusts that food is coming. The constant low-level hunger that drives modern snacking, that restless reaching feeling, largely disappears when meals are reliable and real. This scheduled eating also meant the body had genuine rest periods between meals, long enough for digestion to complete, long enough to tap into stored energy, long enough for something researchers now call the migrating motor complex to run its cleaning cycle through the gut. They didn't know any of that in 1962. They just knew that dinner was at 6, and that meant something. 5. They walked, constantly, casually, without thinking about it. In the 1960s, 48% of children walked or biked to school. Adults walked to the store, to church, to visit neighbors. Nobody thought of it as exercise. It was simply how you got from one place to another, and it adds up in ways that matter. The gentle, consistent movement woven through an ordinary day burns more total energy than an intense gym session sandwiched between 8 hours of sitting. The body wasn't designed for stillness interrupted by bursts of effort. It was designed for what those women had without knowing it. Steady, purposeful movement from morning until evening. The housework alone was significant. Washing dishes by hand 3 times a day, hanging laundry on the line, kneading bread, pushing a heavy vacuum. Researchers estimate the average 1960s housewife burned roughly 1,000 more calories per day than her modern equivalent, just through the ordinary work of keeping a home. No gym membership required, no workout scheduled, just a life that required a body to show up and be useful. 4. The family dinner was non-negotiable. Every evening at 6, something happened in households across America that we have almost entirely lost. Everyone sat down together. The television was off, the table was set, and the meal, whatever it was eaten slowly, in company, with conversation. This matters more than it sounds. It takes roughly 20 minutes for the brain to register fullness. A meal eaten over 30 to 45 minutes, with pauses for talking and listening, gives the body time to catch up with the plate. A meal eaten in 10 minutes in a car or at a desk does not. The family dinner was, without anyone intending it, one of the most effective appetite regulation tools ever invented. It also meant that food was never just fuel. It was the center of the day, the place where the family gathered. That relationship with food as nourishment and connection, not comfort or entertainment or stress relief, kept eating in its proper place. And keeping eating in its proper place is something a great many of us are still trying to find our way back to. 3. Restaurant meals were rare enough to mean something. In 1960, families ate out perhaps once a month. McDonald's had 228 locations across the entire country. Fast food wasn't a weeknight solution, it was an occasional novelty, and sit-down restaurants were reserved for birthdays, anniversaries, and celebrations worth dressing up for. This single habit may explain more about 1960s body weight than any other. Restaurant food is richer, saltier, and more caloric than home cooking. Because it has to be. That's what makes it feel special. When you eat it once a month, your body handles it easily. When you eat it 3 times a week, those extra calories simply accumulate. The difference between an occasional indulgence and a regular habit is the difference that shows up in the mirror. And number 1, this is the one that changes everything. I told you at the start that number 1 wasn't really about food. I meant it. The single greatest difference between those women and us is this: they trusted themselves. They weren't searching, they weren't following someone else's program, second-guessing every meal, Outsourcing their judgment to an app or an influencer or a label, they had a way of eating that they had learned from their mothers, watched hold up over decades, and practiced without drama every single day. They didn't need to be convinced it was working. They could see it was working. We have access to more nutrition information than any generation in human history, and we are more confused, more conflicted, and less at ease with food than any generation that came before us. That is not a coincidence. That is what happens when an industry profits from your uncertainty. The habits on this list aren't complicated. Real food, reasonable portions, meals at a table, a walk to the store, a kitchen that closes between mealtimes. None of it requires a product, a subscription, or a plan. It just requires deciding, quietly, the way your grandmother did, that you already know enough to begin. If this brought something back for you, a dinner table you sat at, a kitchen that smelled like something real, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Those memories deserve a place. If this felt useful, please give it a like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you're there for the next one. We're not done going back, and what's coming next might be exactly what you've been looking for. See you then.